So Nigel, you've been doing a lot of work around Article 6, the new carbon market mechanisms in the Paris Agreement. Can you tell us what happened at COP this year on that front?
Well, we ended up with two decisions. We shouldn't have had any, but when we got there were two draft decisions. One with Article 6.2, the cooperative approaches, where the key point there really was around these inconsistencies that have been reported on. And so the debate was around, well, should that be a red card? Should that mean you cannot transfer the ITMOs, the credits, unless all of these inconsistencies are resolved? In the end, that was not included in the final decision. So it's very much up to buyers to actually do their due diligence and ensure that those requirements are met. The other one was Article 6.4, which is the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism. And the big debate there was around the methodologies and the standards. And there were attempts to direct the supervisory board to come up with a whole load of different standards and methodologies covering different project activities and different aspects. And that caused a lot of problems, people seeing that would get rid of certain type of activities or projects, and others seeing, well, actually that's lowering the standards because there was this element of flexibility brought in. And the other two aspects to it was to bring in what was known as jurisdictional RED+. And finally, there were some attempts to define what is meant by avoidance, removal and reduction.
So Nigel, what do these developments in Article 6 mean for the private sector?
First of all, that Article 6 negotiations and changes to the rules are probably not over. However, the second but key point really is there is a set of rules. It is in operation. The first transactions are happening, and that's what we saw at COP. We saw a number of announcements, normally partnerships between governments and the private sector, launching schemes or trades. One in particular that we were involved in really was Deutsche Bank acting as an arranger in partnership with Honduras and Suriname and the Coalition for the Rainforest Nations to sell those countries' ITMOs to various German corporates who Deutsche had arranged that transaction for those buyers. Adam, you've been doing lots of work in the voluntary carbon market, but also recently we've been seeing the voluntary carbon market and this new Paris Agreement Article 6 carbon market converging. How do you think this new Paris market can help the voluntary carbon market?
So I think it's fair to say that the voluntary carbon market has had a bit of an image problem over the last few years. It was going along at great guns, but then as we entered into this new era of public scrutiny, increased expectations about the technical standards which projects would meet, ultimately some of them were found to fall short of that. And the market has really been trying to play catch up to say, what do we need to do to show quality, to show integrity in this market? And one of the real difficulties, I think, for that in the voluntary market is that it's an unregulated market ultimately. And that's probably been one of the key reasons why it grew so fast. But I think now we're at this place where it needs an element of regulation to take it further, to really scale up. And I think that's where the new Article 6 mechanisms can come into play. If they can create this framework, not just of regulation, but of technical standards, which will apply to projects which fall within that framework, then that's what the voluntary market needs. If it can just come within that framework and still operate in the way that it does, then that may be the key to unlocking its future growth.